sa lahat. Okay, so welcome po sa ating webinar. And before I formally start our program, let us all ask for the guidance of our Lord by our opening prayer.
Dear God, thank you for the opportunity to meet together. Please help us to come together to make this institution reflect your kingdom. Breathe life into our ideas and decisions. Help us build a team that has love and respect at its heart. Give us the strength to continue working for your kingdom in this time of pandemic. Lord, come give us the inspiration to be the best we can be. May we be a shining example of your goodness and truth within, wherever we are. Inspire our thoughts, discussions, and ideas, and continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth for the greater glory of you. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Ayan, hello, good afternoon once again to everyone. I'm Riza Alcorano po, PDO of DICT Laguna, and together with me, we have Ma'am Ranalyn from the regional office, Sir Carlo, and Ma'am Rana, as well as Ma'am Munyena po. So they are my colleagues from the DICT. And to all our participants on board here at our Zoom webinar, good afternoon po. And thank you for being with us despite na kahit siesta time na this afternoon is you were able to join us in our afternoon webinar. So before we start po, let us listen to the opening remarks by our Regional Director from Luzon Cluster 2, Engineer Reynaldo Kisu.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, Luzon Cluster 2, we wish to welcome all of you in today's webinar on reinventing the educational landscape in time of pandemic. We also wish to thank Mr. Ruel Olila for taking time out to be our resource person in this webinar. The COVID-19 pandemic has totally put everything in totally different perspective, especially the educational system. Not just the standard practice of students going to school, of students interacting with their fellow students, and of students discussing topics with their teachers face-to-face has now been totally changed. Direct interaction and direct learning in the schools were temporarily prohibited and suspended. This is a total paradigm shift from the previous system of face-to-face or direct classroom style of teaching that our educational system had known for, has been practicing for centuries. We all knew the hardship of this new environment had on our educational system, not only to the students, but also to the teachers alike. This is the very reason why we are here today. We need to transition and reinvent our educational landscape. We need to adapt to the new normal that this pandemic has brought about for the sake of our students who are also the future leaders for our country. Together, we will make things better and no one will be left behind. Thank you and keep safe, everyone.
All right, thank you, Sir Ray, for that wonderful message. So as mentioned po, our topic for this afternoon's webinar will be reinventing the educational landscape in time of pandemic. So before we start po pala, let me mention some of the pre-event remarks or house rules po. Okay, so wait on. Okay, so for our house rules, we would like to remind everyone to please put your mic on mute or to avoid unnecessary noise, or okay lang i-open if sinabi ng ating RP. So para meron tayong interaction then together with the RP. And then next would be we encourage everybody, if possible, to open their cameras And then if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. And for those joining us in the live stream, please type it at the comment section and I'll bring them up at the end of the presentation. So meron po tayong Q&A at the latter part of the program po natin. And then we are also live on our Facebook page po at the ICT Luzon Cluster 2 Tech for Ed program. And then lastly, feel free to hit that reaction button if you find the topic interesting. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our resource person for this afternoon. Okay, so our resource person for this afternoon will be Sir Ruel G. Olala, Assistant Professor 1, Director of Education Department in ASCOT. And ayan, so about our speaker, Dr. Ruel G. Olila is a graduate of Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in History, commendable, Master of Arts in Political Science, and Doctor of Education in Educational Management and Planning in Manuel L. Quezon University. He is presently the Director of Education, Department of Aurora State College of Technology, or ASCOT, and at the same time a faculty of the Graduate Studies Department. He served as Officer for Student Affairs, Program Chair of HUSOCOM, or Humanities, Social Sciences, and Communication, and as College Affairs Officer of Mount Carmel College, Baler. And when he transferred to Aurora State College of Technology in 2015, he was designated in different key positions as Director of Centro ng Wika at Kultura and Director for Research. He also served as Project Leader or Head Researcher in various research and extension projects funded by government agencies in the Philippines. And Dr. Olila had written books, workbooks, and work texts in various disciplines, education, and social sciences. He is a national awardee of a Seal of Excellence in Cultural and Language by the Commission sa Wikang Filipino, a researcher, a lecturer, a resource speaker in the field of education, research, educational management, social sciences, and a motivational speaker. So di ko na po papatagalin. Let us welcome Sir Ruel, Dr. Ruel G. Olila po, our resource person for this afternoon. Good afternoon, sir. The virtual floor is yours na po.
Gandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Am I clear po? Okay, so it is actually my honor to be invited and be part of the DICT program Tech for Ed or Tech for Ed Education to share to you some of the most important insights and helpful reflections and information with regard to how we respond to the challenges of the pandemic, especially in the field of education. So may I start my screen sharing po? So I've been in the teaching profession for more than 16 years. It was never my dream to be a teacher, but for almost 16 years in the profession, I continue to commit myself and dedicate myself to education as I believe my meager contribution to our society and in our country in general. Okay, and this afternoon I will be sharing to you the challenges and issues brought by the pandemic, together with some of the most helpful insights with regard to how shall we reinvent the education in the present. So one of the most interesting topics that we need to discuss today is that how the education systems are reinventing the educational landscape in the time of the pandemic. And the idea of distance learning has been in place for decades ago, okay? But there was never a period in the history of education in the Philippines that we realize its importance. But the irony is that it is in place decades ago, but still with the unexpected pandemic, okay? Not only in the Philippines, not only in Asia, but in the world, we are still caught unprepared. I would like to begin with Charles Eisenstein, an American public speaker and author, stating that we sense that normal isn't coming back, that we are being born into a new normal, a new kind of society, a new relationship with the earth, a new experience of human being. If we are going to cling to the old normal to come back, okay, that isn't happening. The new normal is the real normal that we have to deal no matter what, no matter how difficult it is. According to a United Nations report, the COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruption of education systems in history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries and all the continents. Closures of schools and other learning spaces have impacted the 94% of the world's student population up to the 99% in low and lower middle income countries. And just to give us a short background with regard to the effects of the pandemic in the Philippines and in different parts of the world, they are the following. The COVID-19 pandemic forced all institutions, government and private, to follow the community quarantine protocols implemented by the government tasked with battling this global pandemic. Sometime in March 16 or 17, 2020, the government issued an order calling for a total lockdown of the different provinces, cities, in the Philippines, and that resulted to community quarantine and lockdowns, large-scale lockdowns implemented by the government agencies. Okay, and then it was followed by the closure of all schools, government and private, to follow the community quarantine protocols. And then contingency plans were issued in the form of laws, circulars, memoranda stating the institution's responses on pre and post COVID-19 interventions. So parang ayaw nating ma-aggravate ang sitwasyon. In order for us to do that, we also implemented the closure of schools in order to prevent the further infection of so many people. Okay? And then followed by number 3, the health protocols were implemented with regard to the responses of the educational institutions. Instead of shutting, hello po.
Hi sir, excuse me po for a while. Medyo yung ano po, yung voice po. I mean there's unwanted noise po. I think sound po yun ng something machine or what.
Okay.
Thank you po sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay na po ba? Clear na po tayo.
Yes sir, it's better
Yan,
na po. Thank you
okay.
po.
So we're going to continue. No? So number 3, health protocols were implemented as a response of the educational institutions. So there are actually countries that instead of shutting all doors for activities to continue, institutions came up with different ideas on how they can contribute. They can continue without risking the health of the teachers and students. And what you can see from the screen is actually a picture from Japan in which they insisted on having their graduation, but instead of requiring their students to come or to go to school and to attend the graduation ceremony, so they were instead represented by robots with pictures, okay, of those students who received their diplomas and certificates. Okay, and then it was followed by sending the stranded students home, and other support services were extended by both the university, the college, the local agencies, and even the national government. Series of lockdowns resulted to the stranded students. So as a support, different government agencies responded to help these stranded students to go home. And then followed by the reporting of the skeletal staff in their respective offices, considering that they still have functions to do and to still facilitate the operation of the different offices. And learners were forced to stay at home and classes were ended. Okay? So nagbago na po yung buhay, nagbago na yung sa isang iglap, biglang nagbago ang buhay ng mga estudyante, ng mga magulang, ng mga empleyado ng gobyerno kasi nga sa halip na we are attending to our regular, normal life, okay? The implementation of the series of quarantine protocols resulted to majority of the population to stay at home. Although we properly understand that it is necessary to follow the protocols because this is the only way that we can prevent the further spread of the virus from among people, especially in the community, to avoid the community and local transmission. And then students passed when educational institutions adopted a new assessment method. Okay? If you can still remember, hindi naman po natin natapos ang ating second semester, ang semestre. But because of that failure to finish that semester, okay, the different schools adopted a new assessment method for them to still compute for the students' performance, even if major variables were missing, and this is actually true in the Philippines. And aside from the impacts on education, impacts to the social, emotional, and psychological well-being of those directly affected, most especially learners, okay? This also resulted to social and economic impact in which the pandemic brought the people into extreme poverty and job loss. It also brought emotional, psychological, financial, spiritual, and even physical challenges and trauma to every individual. That's why during the time of the pandemic, counseling in the time of the pandemic has become one of the most essential services that must be given to people, considering that the mental health of the people suffered a lot. Okay, and then so with the opening of schools, since we strongly believe that learning gaps in the time of the pandemic must be addressed, there were plans to continue with the delivery of instruction despite the ensuing pandemic. And so policymakers, lawmakers, school administrators are planning to open the school year. But due to the so many factors to be considered, okay, with the initial plan to open school now, or then decided to postpone classes and the class openings. And as quarantine protocols loosened, teacher and students were forced to shift to online and modular learning. So based from what you can see from our PowerPoint presentation, teachers spend most of their time printing, sorting the modules, since modular distance education is the only available modality as of the moment. But this also utilize, if not only millions, but billions of pesos in paper, ink, and other related services. And then student and parents take charge of the learning process and manage their own education. So even if parents are not actually prepared, they are forced to take charge of the education of their children, considering that this is the only way that we can fill the gap, the learning gap resulted to as a consequence of the massive lockdowns. Okay, and according to TINGA 2020, there are 3 keys in the new normal. Okay, the number 1 is knowledge, the experience that students and their guardians need to replicate in the process of learning and grounded in fundamental theories of education. The number 1 issue under the modular education is the replication of knowledge. Teachers underwent rigid training for 4 years. They actually took the review in order for them to pass the licensure examination for teachers. And after all those, they still feel incompetent. And so there is a need for a continuous professional development. And parents have to replicate that in an instant. And then number 2, when it comes to skills, modern technology-enabled communication is at the forefront of distance learning. When it comes to skill, another issue is the capacity to utilize ICT in teaching. According to my research about the learning difficulties of students as a school shifted to the flexible learning modality, there is a moderate difficulty among students when it comes to the contents of the lesson, the summative test, and the performance task. So students don't actually find it really difficult to adapt to the new normal, but teachers do. Okay? During the early onset of modular learning, meron pong isang balita ako, I came across with the news posted in Facebook. Okay? A particular professor somewhere in Japan yata ito or somewhere in Southeast Asia who have been doing a lecture for almost 2 hours. But only to find out that after doing all the lectures for 2 hours, he found out that his mic is switched off. Okay, although sabi naman ng mga estudyante doon, there were attempts to inform the teacher that they cannot hear the discussion of the teacher, but all those were not realized by the teacher, and so the teacher continued on doing the lecture for 2 hours only to find out that the microphone is actually off. So parang ganun po yung nagiging case natin. Although there are a lot of teachers who are capable of utilizing, integrating the ICT as they teach, okay? But there are also teachers who are products of the old curriculum, the products of the old generation, who are not capable of adapting to the challenges of the new normal, using technology, integrating technology in their teaching, and that resulted to the problems, okay, among these teachers. And then number 3, when it comes to mindsets, ICT literacy has been the subject of the insets, technology-based learning, hybrid learning, thus resulted to issues of inequality, especially when it comes to the equitable access to quality education even during pandemic. Okay? Sabi nga po sa ating PowerPoint, when it comes to the many educational issues, they already existed before the health crisis. But the health crisis exacerbated our situation. Okay, so schools try to adapt to the new normal. And in order for them to adapt to the new normal in education, there were actually modalities that came into existence so that they can say and realize that they can still continue with the idea of filling the gap of education brought by the pandemic. And these modalities that existed are the distance learning, the blended learning, and homeschooling, respectively. Okay, these are the 3 modalities of how learning shall be delivered in the new normal. At first, okay, distance learning has also 3 forms. Okay, the number 1 form of distance learning is the modular distance learning, and this kind of modality is fitted to the learners who are committed to learn on their own. And then the second modality is the blended learning. This is commonly tagged as the hybrid learning, since this is effective at helping a diverse student body. This modality is the combination of anything that is mentioned in our previous discussion. It may or may not require internet connection, and parents shall also pick up the learning modules in the school. So it is a combination of both online, synchronous, and modular asynchronous classes. Okay, and then distance learning, third and last, is the homeschool modality. The kind of modality is effective if the learner has an available tutor or a parent who is qualified and always available to facilitate the learning of the child. Okay, so yun po yung imahe, that was actually the initial response of our educational institution in order for them to deal with the challenges of the present, considering that we are not actually prepared to go pure online. Okay, those are the different modalities that came into existence so that we can still continue with filling the gap, okay, the learning gaps that existed because of the pandemic. Hindi po kakayanin ng lahat ng mga paaralan sa buong Pilipinas na piliin ang online distance learning, considering that there were students, teachers, okay, who are not actually prepared to utilize technology and the inavailability of gadgets, the lack of knowledge about the use of the technology, and at the same time, the poor internet connection or internet connectivity in the different parts of the Philippines. And the last is the blended learning. In the new normal, all schools will have blended or purely online courses. Training in using teaching and learning platforms will be available for both teachers and students. In the Philippines, the Department of Education, the Commission on Higher Education, and the Technical Education and Skills and Development Authority have issued memoranda and will continue to issue notices to deal with the challenges brought by the pandemic. In higher education, it is called the flexible learning modality as contained in the CHED memo number 4, part 4 number 1, which states that the importance for a learner-centered approach that is deeply rooted in the needs of the students, that educational institutions shall provide learners with the most flexibility on the learning content, schedules, access, and innovative assessment, making use of digital and non-digital tools. Okay? And it is according to my personal opinion, the most practical way in order for us to still deliver instruction even during the time of the pandemic is actually the flexible learning modality. Flexible learning modality will provide learner with the most flexibility according to the CHED memo, the learning content, the schedules, access, and innovative assessment, making use of digital and non-digital tools so as to prevent further discrimination and digital divide among our students. Okay, not all of our students are capable of providing the necessary gadget. They cannot provide laptops. They don't have internet connectivity. And if we're going to require our students to go pure online distance learning, this will eventually result to further discrimination and digital divide among our students. Okay, so and according to our government, according to the Department of Education, they are going to utilize the lockdown period for various academic activities, and those involve online content development, online teaching, and online evaluation. And then number 2, to prepare lesson plan and develop instructional materials. And number 3, to carry on research, write articles, and prepare innovative questions or question bank, etc. that will help them be prepared for the opening of the incoming school year. As to the response of parents, millions of parents have also stepped up and taken charge of their children's education. Most parents are doing all they can in enormously difficult circumstances to minimize and mitigate the significant disruption to learning caused by school closures. As this document makes clear, the greatest success stories have come from where parents and teachers have found ways to work together on behalf of children and young people. Although it is actually difficult to begin, okay, considering that even parents are not actually prepared if we're going to go back to our lecture, okay? There are 3 keys in the new normal, and the number 1 key is knowledge. Okay, maaring ang ating mga magulang ay mga college degree holder, but they are not actually prepared to teach a particular subject, because if we're going to interview parents who are taking charge of the education of their children, even the lessons in the kinder, in grade 1, in grade 2, and in grade 3, those lessons, the teachers, the parents still find all those lessons difficult. Okay, so but sabi nga natin, with the collaboration and continued support of the different stakeholders of education, with the continued support of the government and other institutions, who have a stake in the education, we were able to come up with a promising stories. They are not yet success stories, but a promising story that it is possible for us to still facilitate the education of our children with parents as their teachers at home. This is actually a presentation of how much of the idea of the distance learning among continents of the world were utilized. in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in Latin America, in the Caribbean, in Oceania. Okay, when it comes to the use of radio, okay, radio is more popular in Africa. And then when it comes to television, it is more popular in Africa, in Asia. And then paper-based learning, Asia, Latin America, and Oceania. And then in online learning, it is most popular in Asia and Europe. So this is how the different countries, okay, from among the different continents responded to the challenges of distance education. Okay. So what are the challenges and issues and concerns? Okay. Schools closed, okay, in more than 190 countries. So, and that affected 1.57 billion children and the youth, 90% of the world's student population. Closures happened in quick succession as a measure to contain the COVID-19 virus. Just as speedily, governments deployed measures for learning to continue through platforms, television, and radio in what has been the most far-reaching experiment in the history of education. But when it comes to reopening schools, the tempo is far more uncertain. According to UNESCO data, 100 countries have not yet announced the date of schools to reopen. 65 have plans for partial or full reopening, while 32 will end the academic year online. For 890 million students, however, the school calendar has never been so undefined. But the recent development for the past month is that there were countries who already initiated the opening of schools with the health protocols being perfected. Okay, they were able to develop mechanisms and strategies on how they can secure the health of both the parents, the teachers, and the students going to school. Okay, with the idea of opening schools in order for them to continue with the normal or the old setup in education. So in global monitoring of schools closures caused by COVID-19, okay, those in pink, partially open, closed due to COVID-19, fully open, and in academic break. Okay. Another challenge that we need to consider is the class size, to cut down on or replace or shorten degree programs with certificates, planning, with of reviews, examinations, and graduations. Okay, although the professional regulations commissions was able to conduct, okay, the different licensure examination, as far as I can remember, in engineering and in the bar, yung physician's examination, pero sabi nga po ng isang estudyante na nag-exam mula sa aming paaralan, napakarami pong gastos na ng pera na kakailanganin namin just for us to take the lead, because they still need to do the antigen, they still have to undergo the COVID test, okay, in order for them to ensure that they are not infected on the time of the examination. Okay. And then number 3 issue is that adjusting the opening of school year, we have to consider also the number of units, the quarterly schedules, laboratory subjects, practicum, OJT, research, not to mention the other core functions of HEIs in the field of research, extension, instruction, and protection. As much as we would like to allow even for a limited face-to-face, okay, but considering that we don't have yet the permit to continue with the limited face-to-face setup, we are not allowed to do so. Okay, considering that there are actually, as far as I can remember, accreditation, okay, permit, okay, to be in order for you to continue with the face-to-face learning. Okay, there are actually clamor on the part of our students who have laboratory subjects that they really find it difficult, okay, to study, okay, without the actual demonstration of the skills that they need to learn from their specific subject. But sabi nga natin, we have to explore for different opportunities that will replace demonstration, actual and real life situation, considering that we are not yet allowed to do so. Although the Department of Education initially informed us that there will be at least 150 schools yata in the Philippines who will do a pilot testing of limited face-to-face among the different schools in the Philippines who were qualified to do the limited face-to-face classes. Okay, but for other educational institutions who don't have yet the permit, they cannot proceed to the limited face-to-face if they don't have yet the approval of the national government. Okay, so ang laking challenge po noon, laboratory subjects and then practicum. Pwede ba tayo mag-practicum online? Ano po? Pwede ba tayo mag-OJT online? Okay. And then when it comes to research, there are actually possible research titles or topics that can be done during the time of the pandemic, especially utilizing the online resources. But for those resources requiring physical presence, most especially the social researches that utilizes the participant observation, immersion, okay, as an approach in order to gather data, that is not actually possible. And then it is actually a struggle, okay, on our part, most especially among higher education institutions, to attend to our core functions. Okay, we struggle in our instruction, mahirap po magturo, pero pagdating pa rin sa research and extension, there are so many limitations. Okay, as much as we would like to organize training, okay, to be conducted in a particular community, but when the community realized that the training will be having at least 100 to 150 participants, they will require us to comply to the standards of the MDR. Okay, and they will require us to provide all the necessary conditions to ensure that the health of the participants and the health of the people involved in the activity is not compromised. Okay, so because of the so many requirements and so many limitations when it comes to our mobility, okay, there are instances in which we would rather not continue with our program instead of being exposed to possible infection, either coming from us or coming from the community. Okay, but then although may mga initiatives naman po ang mga educational institutions with regard to how can we utilize the online virtual trainings and seminars like these, okay, that can be categorized as an extension activity of the institution, considering that it is really difficult, if not impossible, to continue with the face-to-face setup. And then number 4, the social value of education and teachers' preparedness. There were actually clamors among certain individuals about the role of teachers today. This is the only time in which teachers' commitment and dedication was appreciated. They came to realize that they lacked the knowledge, the patience to teach children, and that they wanted the pandemic to end, and that they don't need to bother themselves about the education of their children. Ipinapagdasal na po natin na lahat na matapos na ang pandemya because it is really putting so much stress and pressure, okay, on the part. Education lang po yung pinag-uusapan natin. The pandemic is putting a lot of pressure and stress on the part of our parents, okay, as they take charge of the education of their children. Okay? And then ngayon na lamang natin na-realize or nabigyan natin ng pansin o napansin na napakahalaga pala ng trabaho ng guro. And the patience, okay, the commitment and dedication exerted by teachers to teach their subject lessons among our children cannot be replicated by the parents. So hindi daw pala kaya ng mga magulang yung commitment, yung dedication, yung pasensya na ginugugol at binubuhos ng guro para maitawid lamang ang pangangailangan ng mga bata para sa karunungan sa kabila pa rin ng mga nararanasan nating mga pandemya. So sabi nga dito, society should take this opportunity to recognize the social value of the teaching profession, that we must ensure teachers are prepared to fulfill the extremely complex task which has been entrusted to them. Okay, they are not only taking charge of the education of our children, but they are also doing a lot of activities in order for them to still deliver quality instruction. And then Teaching and Learning International Survey states that only 56% of teachers across the OECD receive training. OECD po ay mga European countries in the use of the ICT for teaching as part of their formal education or training, and only 43% of teachers felt well or very well prepared for this element when they completed their initial education or training. Although in our curriculum for the education course, there is this so-called educational technology, okay, that prepares teacher to be at least knowledgeable with the utilization of technology in teaching and how we can possibly take advantage of technology to maximize and make the teaching and learning experiences of our students. Okay, but then according to different surveys, okay, only 56% okay received training and only 43% felt well or very well prepared for this element when they completed their initial education or training. That's why it is really important that teachers, upon completion of a 4-year degree, earning their licenses, okay, and then when they land a job in the different educational institutions in the country, both public and private, must continue to seek for continuous professional development, most especially in the field of ICT, so that they can properly translate okay, those information, the knowledge that they are supposed to teach to their students in a manner that is interesting okay, among our learners. And then number 5, how can we possibly utilize technology without replacing the human contact of teacher and student? So number 5 states that never replace the human contact of teacher and student, as well as impacting the education of over 90% of the world's students. 63 million primary and secondary teachers alone have been affected by the pandemic. Okay, so further, we need to reimagine the future, but we shall not forget the past. We need to do better at technology, but never replace the human contact of teacher and student. So the question that we need to ask in order for us to do this, that how can we possibly utilize technology without replacing the human contact with teacher and student? So that is actually a challenging question, okay? All we thought is that once we were able to record, do a video recording of our lessons, so everything will be okay, okay? What the students will need is to simply play the video presentation again and again until such time that they master the competencies, okay, that we expect from our students to learn. Okay, pero hindi daw dapat pala ganon. How can we possibly utilize technology without replacing the human contact of teacher and student? So ibig sabihin, even with the presence of technology, even with the utilization, the integration of ICT in our teaching, we shall not allow the technology to entirely dominate okay, the education process, the teaching and learning experience. We have to maintain the human contact of teacher and student. And number 6, the role of technology in the past, okay, according to Akwasi, okay, technology has dictated its use in education, but today, education should begin to dictate what kind of technology it needs. Ang education na daw ang nagdidikta kung ano ang kailangan niya para maging applicable pa siya in order for us to say that education will still be relevant and responsive, okay, despite the challenges brought by the pandemic. So, anong ibig sabihin po natin na education shall dictate what kind of technology it needs? Pinipilit nating makabuo ng iba't ibang mga platforms na magre-replicate ng real life classroom experience. Okay, we are trying to replicate or to develop platforms or programs or applications, no matter how you call that initiative or innovation, okay, that will replicate the actual classroom situation. Okay, and then okay, with those innovations, so they are trying to make use of those innovations in order for them to give the same experience, deliver the same instruction among our students and our teachers. Okay, pero sabi nga po natin dito, okay, education is dictating what kind of technology it needs. Okay, the different learning platforms, the learning management systems, and others came to exist. Okay, these are patterned after the regular classroom experience. So today, education is dictating what kind of technology it needs. And according to a UNICEF study, okay, internet access that covered 180 countries. In 71 of the countries surveyed, less than half of the population had access to the internet. So we were informed that the technology played a significant role, okay, in the new normal. Okay, but then with the survey, okay, among 183 countries, only 71, okay, of these countries surveyed, less than half of the population had access to the internet. Okay. According to the UNICEF, the COVID-19 pandemic then has laid bare the growing digital divide between the richest and the poorest, one that includes access to education. Okay, kaya nga sinasabi po natin dito na as we push for the utilization of technology in the new normal, as we push for a pure online distance education, okay, the more that the COVID-19, those initiatives will also lay bare the growing digital divide among the richest and the poorest, one that includes access to education. Okay, and the number 7, okay, and we need an updated approach to education. We don't want to be spoon-fed. Students don't want a boring lecture. We want collaboration, personalization, and engagement. We want teachers to catch up and improve their ICT literacy. So there is a need for an updated approach to education. The youth no longer wants to be a mere receiver of information. Instead, they are open to new approaches in education. They want to collaborate, teaching to be personalized, and to have an active involvement in the teaching and learning process. Okay. And then from learning recovery process, from assessing learning outcomes during school closures, ensuring their socio-emotional well-being, and taking measures to address disparities through remedial approaches. Support to teachers in their professional development will be essential to success. So as we try to adapt, to the new trends in the new normal, it is really important that teachers are well supported, especially when it comes to the importance of professional development, trainings related to the competencies of the teachers related to the necessary skills, not only in ICT, okay, that will help them be more effective teacher, okay, even if they are actually utilizing only the modular, the online, the blended learning modality. That whatever the learning modality that a particular school or institution is adapting, they can still be an effective teacher and they can still ensure that they are delivering quality education. Okay, so and then we have to ensure that the current crisis does not widen learning inequalities and that the rights of children and youth are protected. So many are saying that we are in the same sea. Okay, yes, but the reality is that we are not in the same boat. So our initiatives shall not aggravate the learning difficulties, shall not aggravate the gap, okay, between learners, students, and parents, and we shall provide opportunities for us to continue without discriminating and leaving even a single student behind. So another interesting question that we need to ask is that with all the challenges, issues, and responses that we had for more than a year, okay, that we have that we are experiencing the pandemic. So another interesting question that we need to ask is that how the pandemic will reshape the future of the global education. Okay, with the abrupt changes happening to educational setup and innovations made, how will this reshape the future of global education? Okay, yan, according to UNESCO, okay, we cannot return to the world as it was before. If we are hoping that after the pandemic, we can revert to the old normal, we have to think twice. Because according to UNESCO, this is the most opportune time to revolutionize education, that we cannot return to the world as it was before. The pandemic may end, but the world cannot go back to what it was before. So ano po ang naging option natin? Like for example, even the pandemic will end, for example, by next year or by 2022, 2023, or 2024. What will happen now? The question is that, can we go back to our old normal? According to UNESCO, no. Okay, the pandemic may end, but the world cannot go back to where it was before. Okay. So let us now consider the different ways on how we can possibly revolutionize education in the new normal, and the most important considerations in order for us to continue to reinvent and revolutionize education. So we have to also consider the impact on budgets, okay, the huge number of millions, okay, the huge number of dropouts in millions. We also experienced the series of dropouts among our students. Ano po, at first, napakadami ng mga nag-enroll. But after a few weeks, a few months, little by little, these students who initially enrolled in our program will inform us that they will drop from the school rolls. So most of the time, the issues, they don't have an access. They find it really difficult. They are not actually prepared. They don't have the necessary gadget. Although we are saying that we don't require gadget, that's why we adopt the flexible learning modality, because if you don't have an opportunity to attend to online classes, you can still continue learning using the modular learning. Okay, because teachers, aside from online classes, we also develop instructional materials, worksheets. Okay, we prepare our modules, we prepare our PowerPoint presentation and send them to students, and we communicate to them whatever is convenient to them. It may be through the use of our email, through the use of the group chat, Facebook, and any other platforms. But still, okay, students will go to us informing us that they will now drop from the school rolls because of they are no longer, they are not actually prepared. They find it difficult to adjust. Okay, there are so many concerns, okay, most especially the financial, emotional, and psychological issues, okay, involved under the new normal. And then another three is the learning crisis will exacerbate inequality. So the global learning crisis, what happened if schools and colleges fails to learn the change. Okay, I don't know if you know what, when I was browsing the Facebook last weekend, okay, I came across with this particular video of an online class, okay, of a particular teacher. When in that particular video, the student asked the teacher, "Sir, kung wala po kaming pambili ng laptop," sabi ng isang estudyante. Ano po ang sagot ng teacher? Mag-drop. Kung walang pambili ng laptop, mag-drop. Okay? So that's the immediate response of the teacher. Although I am not actually criticizing the response of the teacher, maybe there is this, maybe they are actually utilizing technology in order for them to deliver the quality instruction, especially if the subject requires the use of those gadgets like laptops. Pero sinabi po talaga doon ng teacher na kapag walang pambili ng laptop, mag-drop. Okay? So yun, sabi nga natin, learning crisis will exacerbate inequality. The more that our students will feel, okay, that they are really poor, okay, that they don't have the capacity to go along with the trend of education in the new normal, because they feel that they are left behind, because they don't have all the things, the gadget, okay, they don't have all the materials that their teachers required for them to have in order for them to be ensured that they can cope up with the demands and pressures of an online education. Okay, so I will repeat, we have actually an opportunity to require our students to resort to pure online through the utilization of the learning management system, but we did not do that. We adhere to the memo of the Commission on Higher Education with regard to the utilization of the flexible learning modality, because we don't want we don't want students to feel that they are being left behind, that their conditions are being taken for granted. Okay, it may be not an issue on our part, but having a gadget or having no gadget is actually an issue on the part of our students. That's why there were stories actually in internet, in Facebook, in which parents, regardless of the economic conditions, okay, that they have, they continue to spend, okay, they sacrifice a lot in order for them to at least buy a mobile phone, okay, so that their children, okay, their granddaughters, grandchildren, okay, grandson, nephews, nieces, di ba, can still proceed to and attend to their online education. But sabi nga natin, there must be an option in order for us to say that education will still be responsive and relevant according to the conditions of our students. Because the more we insist them to provide for these things necessary for education to continue, the more that they will feel that they are being discriminated. Okay, the more that they will feel that there is this learning gap, the more that they will feel that there is really a digital divide, and that will result to feelings of inequality and discrimination. And the number 4, EdTech is not going to be the great equalizer. Okay, yan, ang education daw, ang educational technology is not going to be the great equalizer. Kasi nabanggit naman na natin, okay, hindi lahat ng mga estudyante natin ay may kakayanan. Okay, kaya nga sa actual experience, whenever a student will say that, sir, sorry for submitting my requirements late, okay, because I only load once a week, okay, I avail the 24 hours unlimited internet, and that is the time in which I will upload, okay, and send all my submissions for a particular week, so that I don't need to spend a lot when it comes to buying data, okay, for my mobile phone. And that can be understood, okay? So that's okay as long as, for me, that's okay as long as students will still comply to the requirements of the subject, okay? Because we properly understand the plight of our learners, most especially in the rural areas, the far-flung areas, in which yung pagkain nila ay struggle nila in a day, how much more to spend extra money to be spent for load, okay, in order for them to ensure that they are going to have an internet connectivity. Okay, and then the high stakes exams are unfair this year and every year. Nabanggit na rin naman na po natin kanina, although some proceeded with the licensure examination, but that is actually difficult. According to one of my students, okay, there are a lot of expenses to be incurred just for them to go outside the province and just for them to apply for their licensure examination. Because if they're not going to comply, they cannot take the exam. So they would rather spend, okay, a lot of money for them to take the exam and earn their respective licenses, okay, because they really need to take the exam and pass in order for them to start for their job hunts. Okay, and then number 6, education markets will be disrupted, putting strain on the public sector. Okay, nababalitaan niyo po ba ang series of closures of private schools, most especially in the Philippines? Hindi na nila kinaya ang financial blow ng pandemya, and that resulted to not temporary but permanent closure. So ibig sabihin, even if they had existed for about 50 years, 100 years, but the pandemic led them to permanent closure because they can no longer carry the financial blows, okay, of the pandemic. And that will put a lot of strain on the public sector. Naiintindihan po natin, we properly understand the importance of the private educational institutions when it comes to catering the needs of our learners, because the reality is that, okay, the students actually are congested, okay, in the public education sector, okay, and then if most of the private schools will close, will shut down, that will put a lot of strain on the public sector, considering that they don't have a lot of resources, they don't have the facilities to accommodate all those students who are coming from the private school who had permanently closed because of the pandemic. Okay, so with the pandemic at hand, it is actually advancing education for tomorrow. Okay, pero sabi nga natin, although we are not thankful, hindi po tayo nagpapasalamat sa pandemya. Okay, ito ay consequence na lang ng kasalukuyan. We cannot do anything about it, no matter how we dislike, how we hate, okay, no matter how we dispense the idea of the pandemic, but we cannot do anything about it. It is the reality nowadays that's becoming part of our normal life. COVID positive every now and then in our own offices, in our own houses, in our own community. Okay? Sabi nga ng ilang mga individual, we are beginning to live with the virus. Okay? We are beginning to live with the virus. Although we are not thankful actually, because we knew a lot of difficulties, a lot of deaths, okay, that had happened and will continue to happen in the future, brought by the pandemic. A lot of job losses among the people resulted to hunger and poverty. Pero meron namang naidudulot na rin na parang maganda ang pandemya, especially when it comes to the education. Ano raw po yun? It is actually advancing education for tomorrow. We are not prepared. Okay, we don't have the mechanism. The teachers lack the necessary skills in order for them to utilize technology. There are a lot of resources needed. Okay, there are a lot of demands and pressures. Napakarami pong problema na dala ng pandemya. But I will repeat, okay, the initiatives at hand, the innovations that we are trying to do, the partnerships, the collaborations, the different things that we contribute in order for us to at least lessen the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic among schools, among teachers, among parents, and most especially among learners. But it is actually advancing education for tomorrow. Okay. So what then is the future of education? So there are actually 9 ideas for concrete actions today. Okay, according to UNESCO, if we really wanted the education, okay, to advance for tomorrow, there are so many things that we have to consider. Okay, and these things might be personal or individual, or it might be the concern of a particular department, or it might be a concern of the policymakers. But regardless of whoever concern that is, we have to take action. Number 1, okay, we have to commit to strengthen education as a common good. Education is a bulwark against inequalities. In education, as in health, we are safe when everybody is safe. We flourish when everybody flourishes. So ano ibig sabihin po nito? Ano po ang ibig sabihin nito? Education shall not aggravate inequality. Okay, we keep on stressing on that idea because students, okay, feel, okay, that there is really inequality because of the trends that we have right now. So education shall not aggravate inequality. Education shall find for ways for the poor and the underprivileged to feel that they are still part and they can still play an important role in the teaching and learning process. Okay, so that's number 1. We have to commit to strengthen education as a common good. We have to let our learners feel that despite of the economic conditions that they are right now, okay, they still have to feel that they are still a part and an active role and will play an active role, okay, in the teaching and learning process. And number two, we have to expand the definition of the right to education so that it addresses the importance of connectivity and access to knowledge and information. Okay, the Commission calls for a global public discussion that includes learners of all ages on ways the right to education needs to be expanded. So aside from taking care of the education of the young, we must also consider the education of all ages, that each will not fall prey to misinformation. Siguro I understand why there are a lot of people who are no longer excited in opening their social media account, most importantly Facebook, considering that education is coming, election is coming this year, 2020. And then there are a lot of candidates who are expressing their intention to run from the lowest to the highest positions in the country, and a lot of political dramas, politicking, and etc., etc. And if you will just rely solely from the information that you can get from the social media, from the YouTube, the internet, you will be misled. You will be misinformed. Okay, the social media is the #1 source of misinformation. Okay, ang dami-dami lumalabas na ang mga kung ano-anong mga information, and for an ordinary individual who don't have the capacity to discriminate between the truth, between the false, between the revised history, between what is factual and what is actually man-made, okay, we will be misled, and that will result to misinformation. Okay, so we have to make sure that the education will still consider the education of all ages. Hindi lang po mahalaga ang edukasyon ng mga kabataan na simula sa kinder hanggang grade 12 hanggang college. It is really important that government offices to continue exert effort in the education, okay, in educating our citizenry. Okay, in educating the people so that they will be continuously informed with regard to the issues at hand, and then they can discriminate and identify factual from the fake news. Okay, and to be critical about the different social issues, okay, at hand, okay, to help them decide properly and critically, and that decision is for or will contribute for the betterment of not only of our individual situation, but the betterment of the country and of the society in general. Okay? Nakakalungkot people will argue about a particular issue, but their only resource or their only reference is those information that they read or heard or watched from Facebook and YouTube. Okay, without actually validating ano nga ba talaga ang katotohanan, alin nga ba talaga ang hindi. And okay, those misinformation, the fake news continue to thrive in social media, and then there are a lot of individuals, okay, who were not properly informed and who were not properly taught with regard to the critical thinking skills, okay, that they continue to fall prey to misinformation. Okay, number 3. We have to value the teaching profession and teacher collaboration. There has been a remarkable innovation in the responses of educators to the COVID-19 crisis, with those systems most engaged with families and communities showing the most resilience. We must encourage conditions that give frontline educators autonomy and flexibility to act collaboratively. Okay, so we must allow teachers to play an active role in the process and not just a mere receiver of information. When it comes to the relevance and responsiveness of the curriculum, there are actually gaps, okay, or groups and individuals claiming that the standards of the curriculum are not realistic and not according to the context of the actual experiences of teachers and students. Okay, sinasabi nila na hindi nila naiintindihan ang konteksto ng kalalagayan ng nasa field. They don't really understand the context of the experiences and the situation of those teachers who are actually in the field. They are just inside their offices, dictating, okay, the different offices, agencies, okay, the teachers to do this and to do that without actually knowing the relevance and responsiveness of those initiatives. Okay, so sabi nga ng mga teachers, those orders, those innovations are actually not realistic and not according to the context of the actual experiences of teachers and students. Okay, policymakers don't really know according to them and understand what is happening in the field, what is happening inside the classroom, and the actual scenarios that compromise the quality of education. So merong hindi aligned, the policymaker will implement a particular policy upon deliberations with the so-called experts, and only to find out that the comments of teachers who are in the field, okay, they are saying that those are not actually relevant and responsive to the context of the situation and experiences of teachers and students. So ibig sabihin, malayo daw sa katotohanan. Okay. And number 4, the right, okay, of the children when it comes to yung participation, intergenerational justice and democratic principles should compel us to prioritize the participation of students and the young people broadly in the construction of desirable change. Okay. Nowadays, they want the present generation wanted collaboration. They want change. They want that their voices be heard, and they want to take an active role towards educational transformation. Okay, we have mentioned a while ago that the present generation are now taking an active role in the process. Okay, gone are the days in which the young generation do not participate in the decision making. Okay, when it comes to issues concerning education, concerning society, concerning poverty, concerning hunger, about so many things, no? But today they wanted that their voices be heard, and they wanted to take part, okay, towards transformation of the society in general, and more importantly, the transformation of the educational system. And number 5, protect the social spaces provided by schools as we transform education. The school is a physical space is indispensable. Traditional classroom organization must give way to variety of ways doing school. But the school, as a separate space-time of collective living, specific and different from other spaces of learning, must be preserved. So the question is that, shall we stick to doing school the traditional way, or shall we explore ways to doing school outside the 4 walls of the classroom? Okay, so we were able to do initial innovations, although the system is not yet perfect, but we were able to bring the education outside the 4 walls of the classroom. Okay, and if we still cling to the old normal in education, and that we wanted the pandemic to end so that we can go back to traditional face-to-face, okay, nangangahulugan lamang na yan na we are still adhering to doing school the old way. Okay, because we don't want to continue with exploring the different opportunities to doing school outside the 4 walls of the classroom. Okay. So next, number 6, if education will thrive with a ready-made content built outside of the pedagogical space and human relationships, the question will be its relevance and responsiveness. Relevance to the life of the present generation and responsiveness to the needs of the times. Okay? Okay, the number 6 says that we have to make free and open source technologies available to teachers and students. Open educational resources and open access digital tools must be supported. Education cannot thrive with ready-made content built outside of the pedagogical space and outside of the human relationships between teacher and students, nor can education be dependent on digital platforms controlled by the private companies. Okay, so yun, ano? So nabanggit nga natin, if we wanted education to thrive with the ready-made content, therefore, the number 1 question that we need to address is its question of relevance and responsiveness. Iyan ba ay naaayon sa pangangailangan at sitwasyon at kalalagayan ng mga grupo o mga sektor na ninanais nating matulungan o mabigyan ng edukasyon sa pamamagitan ng ating mga inisyatiba. Okay. And number 7, we have to ensure scientific literacy within the curriculum. This is the right time for deep reflection on curriculum, particularly as we struggle against the denial of scientific knowledge and actively fight misinformation. Education must serve as a tool to maintain the truth and factual information. It is necessary that if teachers, learners, to think critically and fight disinformation and misinformation, especially today that different forces are taking advantage of the internet to propagate fake news. Fake news are everywhere. And we can no longer distinguish what is the truth, and what is fake news, because those false information seem to be true, especially to those who don't have the skills in discriminating the truth, the factual, from the false information. And number 8, protect domestic and international financing of public education. The pandemic has the power to undermine several decades of advances. National governments, international organizations, and all education and development partners must recognize the need to strengthen public health and social services, but simultaneously mobilize around the protection of public education and financing. You know what, with the sudden shift to a different modality, when all the energy and resources were utilized to post-COVID-19 recovery, what will happen to the existing programs, innovations, which are products of a decade-long advances in education? Diba? Like, for example, we have the K-12, diba? But because of the pandemic, and we cannot, for example, conduct our face-to-face classes, and if we're going to follow the provisions of the K-12 curriculum, hindi na siya kakayanin because of the current setup that we have today. So with that, nabuo naman po ang most essential learning competencies. So ibig sabihin, identify na lang natin what are the most essential competencies that must be learned by our students, even if without actually completing or discussing all those topics contained in the curriculum. What is important is that students with specific lessons identified by the teacher with the help of the administrators, the experts in education, we can still ensure that despite the limitations when it comes to the content, students are able to master the competencies desired by the curriculum, required by the curriculum for the students to master. And number 9, advance global solidarity to end current levels of inequality. COVID-19 has shown us the extent to which our societies exploit power imbalances and our global system exploits inequalities. The Commission calls for renewed commitments to international cooperation and multilateralism, together with the revitalized global solidarity that has empathy and an appreciation of our common humanity at its core. This is in the national level, okay, that attempts to end inequality. As we advance to the future of education, there should be no one left behind. Okay, and these were actually initiatives to provide. There were actually initiatives to provide laptops, gadgets, learning resources in the institutional level or in the local level, but we are looking into an initiative in the national and global level that will help eliminate inequality among our learners. So these are the 9 things that we need to consider in order for us to say that all our initiatives are actually advancing, okay, for tomorrow. Okay. And so why distance education? Bakit naman pinipilit natin ang distance education? Actually po, ang distance education ay meron naman talaga siyang mga advantages and disadvantages. So unang-una, okay, the advantages are the following: ability to combine work with existing commitments. It is cheaper, no deadlines, less pressure, no set start date, and you can decide your time of and place of study. And no matter where you live, you can still achieve a degree from anywhere in the world. There were actually countries, universities who are offering distance education, okay, from the different students coming from the different parts of the globe, okay. So this is not actually something new, okay, and these are the advantages, and then there are also disadvantages. Distance learning requires self-motivation. If you are not motivated to learn, if you are not actually decided and committed, okay, to take charge of your own education, you can never learn from this modality. Lack of face-to-face time in virtual learning. Distance learning does not offer immediate feedback. Distance learning must be accredited. Distance learning does not give students the opportunity to work on oral communication skills. Okay, not unlike during the time in which we have our face-to-face, we can actually require our students to stand, to recite, and express themselves. Okay, and then distance learning does not always offer all the necessary courses online. And number 7, distance learning requires you to have constant and reliable access to technology. Okay, so with all this, another interesting question that we need to ask is that, what's next? Whether or not the pandemic may continue, may be controlled later on, what will now happen to education? Ano na po ang mangyayari sa education? Kung matatapos ang pandemya o magtutuloy ang pandemya, ano ang mangyayari sa education? Shall we revert or return or go back to the old normal? Kapag natapos na ba ang pandemya, babalik na ba tayo sa ating dating gawi? Okay? And then, what shall we do with the innovations and initial success stories that we develop as the pandemic pushed us to reinvent education? Ano na ang mangyayari sa ating mga innovations, sa mga ilang mga success stories na ating nagawa, okay, that we were able to develop, okay, even for a short period of time, because the pandemic pushed us to reinvent education. Okay, and another question is that if we will revert to the old normal, are we going to waste billions of resources exhausted to deal with the challenges of pandemic to education? Kung pinapangarap natin bumalik sa ating old normal, okay, let's say we were able to contain the virus, the pandemic ended, okay, then what will happen now to the billions of pesos or dollars that we already invested in education? related to the implementation of distance, modular, and blended learning. Okay, are we ready to waste the billions of dollars or pesos exhausted to deal with the challenges of pandemic to education? So, bakit po natin tinatanong ang ganitong mga tanong? Okay? Why am I asking these questions? Because in just a short period of time, we were able to make significant innovations that, when continued, will lead to reforms and changes in education. The word is revolutionizing education. The innovations set up that we have right now can be an answer to the serious problems of face-to-face education. And what are those serious problems of face-to-face education? Remember that we have problem about the facilities. We have problem about our resources. We have problem when it comes to the need of teachers. We have problems about the number of books that we have in our library to be utilized by our students. We have problem with regard to our learning resources and so many others. If distance education works for others, if distance education works with others, how come it did not in the Philippines? What are the policy initiatives to perfect the system? If you are just responding to deal with the temporary concerns of education in the present, we are not trying to explore opportunities to advance education for tomorrow. So tandaan po natin, I will repeat, if we are just responding to deal with the temporary concerns of education in the present, and then later on when everything was controlled and everything is normal again, when we talk about normal, it means that we no longer have the unseen enemy, we no longer have the pandemic. What are we going to do now? Babalik ba tayo sa ating dating kinagawian? So I will repeat for the third time. If we are just responding to deal with the temporary concerns of education in the present, we are not trying to explore opportunities to advance education for tomorrow. Gusto nating bumalik sa dati, sa traditional, sa ating old normal, and all those innovations and initiatives, if not wasted, will become inapplicable nowadays if we will choose to go back to the old. Ayan. So I would like to quote the words delivered by Antonio Guterres, the 9th Secretary General of the United Nations, who took office on January 1, 2017, about the initial responses that we need to do with regard to the pandemic and its impact to education. So according to him, the future of education is here. We have a generational opportunity to reimagine education. We can take a leap towards forward-looking systems that deliver quality education for all as a springboard for the sustainable development goals. To achieve this, we need investment in digital literacy and infrastructure, an evolution towards learning how to learn, a rejuvenation of lifelong learning, and strengthened links between formal and non-formal education. And we need to draw on flexible delivery methods, digital technologies, and modernized curricula while ensuring sustained support to teachers and communities. And as the world faces unsustainable levels of inequality, we need education, the great equalizer, more than ever. We must take bold steps now to create inclusive, resilient, quality education systems fit for the future. So to give stress, according to Antonio Guterres, the future of education is here. We have a generational opportunity to reimagine education. And to quote our Secretary Leonor Briones on education in the Philippines amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Education must continue. No ifs, no buts. Whatever happens, it has to continue by whatever means. It has to continue. We owe it to our learners. Okay, and further, according to her, we educators must always strive for lifelong learning. We need to be constantly educated, and we must strive to possess mastery in our fields. It is important that we do this so that we can impart new learnings to our learners. And as for my final okay, so according to an Ethiopian president, okay, COVID-19 has the potential to radically reshape our world, but we must not passively sit back and observe what plays out. Now is the time for public deliberation and democratic accountability. Now is the time for intelligent collective action. And as for my final message with regard to this particular talk about reinventing the future of education in the time of pandemic, the pandemic may have forced us to get out of our comfort zones inside the four walls of the classroom, but it also enables us to revolutionize and reinvent the educational landscape, a peek into the future. So with that, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude and appreciation to the ICT for giving me an opportunity to share to you about those information related to education and how each one of us will contribute to the reinventing the educational landscape in time of the pandemic. So thank you very much. I hope that you learned a lot from my sharing, from the presentation. It is my honor and privilege to be part of this initiative to engage in information campaign and dissemination, because this is one of the most effective ways that we can deliver education, information, regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of geography, and regardless of the so many barriers and limitations. Okay. Mabuhay po at maraming salamat po.
Ayan, sorry, nakamute pala ako. So, thank you, Sir Romel. Ay, Esther Roel pala. Sino si Romel? So, ayan, thank you po, sir, for that very timely and very interesting topic na na-discuss niyo po. So, since nag-open na po yung classes for this school year, no? So, sa ASCOD po ba, sir, nag-accept na po kayo for the face-to-face? Wala akong video.
Actually, wala pa po. Ano po,
Wala pa din.
we are not yet to implement limited face-to-face, considering that we don't have yet the permit coming from the Commission on Higher Education.
So, ayan. So, open na po tayo for your questions about our topic. So, pwede po kayo mag-unmute or pwede niyo pong i-chat sa ating chat box kung meron po kayong questions sa ating resource person. And ayan, para masagot din po ni Sir Rowell yung inyong mga questions. Or if anyone would like to share about their experience, I'm sure we have a lot of participants from the academy also. So ayan. Ma'am Rana, meron ba tayong questions from our Facebook live stream? Okay, hindi ko kasi makita. Ayan, so thank you daw po, sir. Sabi from Junior Andres po. And then from Ma'am Eunice, thank you, sir. Napaka-timely talaga. And then, so ayan. Any questions po? And so habang nag-iisip po ng questions ang ating participants, maybe we could present our certificate of recognition to our resource speaker. Okay. So let me just read the citation. The Republic of the Philippines Department of Information and Communications Technology. This certificate of recognition is given to Ruel G. Olila in grateful recognition of his invaluable support as resource speaker during the webinar entitled Reinventing the Educational Landscape in Time of Pandemic of the Technology Empowerment for Economic Development, or the TechRed program of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, Luzon Cluster 2. So given this 28th day of September 2021, signed by our Regional Director, Engineer Reynaldo TC. So, ayan. Also, since it is, this webinar is in partnership of Aurora State College of Technology, may we also present the certificate of appreciation to Aurora State College of Technology in grateful appreciation of their invaluable support and coordination in the conduct of webinar entitled Reinventing the Educational Landscape in Time of Pandemic of the TechRed program conducted on September 28, 2021, signed as well by our Regional Director, Engineer Reynaldo TC. Also, we also give the certificate of appreciation to ASCOT Zabali Baler Main Campus Tech for Ed Center, and also sa Department of Education, ASCOT po. So, ayan. Thank you so much. So, ayan. Meron na kayong... Okay, so meron ditong shinare si Ma'am Maria Rayal po ba ito? Ayan, so far wala naman po akong question. Hopefully mag-end na ang pandemic. So mahirap pagsabay ng pagiging teacher at parents kasi kailangan ako ng students ko. Then at the same time, yung eldest ko, my module. So ayun. I'm sure madami pong nakaka-relate po talaga, ano. So meron din akong nabalitaan na dahil sa pandemic, dahil sa pressure sa modules, sa online classes, ganyan. Merong mga hindi kinaya and ayun, nag-suicide because hindi daw makasubmit ng modules, hindi makaprepare ng modules, ganyan, at walang gadgets na gagamitin for the online class. So sana nga matapos na itong pandemic para tuloy-tuloy na yung face-to-face classes natin. Okay, so any more share, kung sino pa po gusto mag-share or may questions po before we end this webinar? Ayan, going once, going twice. So wala na siguro, no? I'm sure marami nakarelate and they've understand the topic for this afternoon. Okay. So ayan. For our closing remarks na po, may we have Engineer Petronilio Villaperte, our TOD Chief, to have his closing remarks po. Sir Nilo, good afternoon po.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Riza.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon po.
As we conclude today's event, to everyone who are on board, good afternoon. And on behalf of our cluster director, Engineer Ray TC, maraming salamat po sa aming partner, Aurora State College and Technology, presented by Sir Ruel G. Olila, who happened also our SO speaker. Thank you so much for your support in embracing our Tech for Ed program. And also, thank you very much for your time for today's event in sharing with us your knowledge in reinventing the educational landscape, especially in this time of pandemic. And my response to those situations na binanggit mo kanina, talagang totoo what is happening now in our education. The challenges we are encountering. The government is doing some initiative para po mabigyan po ng solution, ma-address itong problema natin na dinadala po ng pandemic ito. One of it is we have this Tech for Ed giving services to to those who can't afford, especially on their online teaching and in learning also. We also have our free Wi-Fi project, giving free internet service to those in the public places. And other capacity building activities we are undertaking. And those are just few of the initiative our department, the ICT, is doing now. And looking forward, Sir Rowell, to have you again as our RP in the next webinar to come. And also to our team in the DICT Cluster 2, to Ma'am Rana, to Ma'am Nena, to Ma'am Riza, and also to Ma'am Roma. Thank you for the job well done. And of course, to all the participants who actively joined this webinar, thank you for your time. And we hope you learn a lot from our speaker, Sir Rowell, and be able to apply it in our learning and teaching activities. So once again, good afternoon, everyone, and let's stay safe.
And thank you, Sir Nilo. And I'm sure this will not be the last time na magkakaroon tayo ng webinar in partnership with ASCOT, no? So sa lahat ng ating participants, thank you so much. And we will be announcing another series of webinars po. And make sure na you follow our Facebook pages, Tech for Ed program po, and the ICT Luzon Cluster 2. For our post-evaluation po, the link is posted po. So kindly access that link, and that will also serve your attendance and for your certificates as well. So ayan, thank you so much everyone for attending this webinar. Thank you po, Sir Rowell, for your time and the knowledge you've imparted for today's webinar po. Thank you so much. And ayan, so before we go, I'm reminded po na we will be having our class picture po. Photo ops daw po. So may we request everyone to open their cameras for the picture taking. Okay. And kung okay na po yung post-evaluation, kung nakopy na po, ayan, para po makapag-fill out sila and para mabigyan ng certificates. Make sure po na correct and tama po yung nilalagay nilang email, since minsan may mga nagba-bounce back na emails po sa amin and hindi namin nasisendan ng certificates. So ayan, nasa chat box na din po yung link, kindly access na lang din po. So thank you so much. And then, pa-stop na po siguro ng ating screen sharing para makapag-picture. Okay, na cut of 3 po. 1, 2, 3. Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, everyone. Good afternoon po sa lahat. Thank you.
Salamat po.
Thank you for joining. Bye-bye po.
Thank you, Sir Rowell.